All right. So I've given myself a few days to really digest what I think about Rise of Skywalker. And I must say my opinion hasn't changed. It's a really, really good movie that I really enjoyed. But more and more over the weekend, I was reading and watching reviews from so-called expert critics out there who continue to act like this movie is the worst thing that ever happened to cinema. And I must say that I really decided I wanted to spend a few minutes just kind of addressing some of the things they said and really kind of critique the entire profession of film critics. I mean, first of all, if you haven't already heard, there was, I think it was Entertainment Weekly, don't sue me if I'm wrong, but one of their critics admitted that they watched the first half episode of The Witcher and skipped to the fourth episode, yet they were allowed to do a review. That's unacceptable. If these people are going to be giving their judgment and potentially making some people either watch or don't watch something which is messing with people's money and people's careers, they should at least have some integrity. Now, I'm not going to go out and say that I think any of these critics skipped watching the movie and just wrote their reviews, but I will say that I feel like some of them probably pretty much had down in their heads what their review was going to be before they saw the movie. And if that's the case, and I do think that's the case with a lot of them, that's pretty unacceptable. And I think part of it is, I think a lot of these critics were butthurt that they liked The Last Jedi, yet audiences were pretty divided on it. Like, it was a big FU to the audience that they didn't agree with them. And I'm not even saying this is a conscious thing. I'm not saying they did it on purpose or that there was a majority of them. But, there's so much venom in a lot of these reviews. There's got to be something psychological where they decided that they were going to dislike this movie unless if it absolutely blew them away. So I'm going to go over a couple of the reviews here that I found on Twitter or on Rotten Tomatoes and kind of give you a rundown on what I think of what they said. And I agree. I will agree with some of the things that they said. So first one is by Sean Burns, the New England Movies Weekly. And he said, the elephant in the room here is that they accidentally made a real movie last time. So, of course, J.J. Abrams was brought back on board to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. That sounds like somebody that really liked The Last Jedi and was mad that audiences didn't overwhelmingly agree with him. And I'm not calling out his integrity specifically, and I'm not saying that I'm completely right on that, but that's how I'm reading it. That he's mad that people didn't agree with his review of the last movie. And honestly, I haven't even looked to see what his review actually said on The Last Jedi, but there, it made pretty obvious that he thought that it was a real movie. You know, my other reaction to this is that, you know, Disney and Kathleen Kennedy and ultimately J.J. Abrams had a big decision to make when they wrote The Rise of Skywalker. They couldn't afford to have another divisive movie in The Rise of Skywalker. They needed it to be one that fans overall liked, because it wasn't just about them making a movie and making money on this. It was about setting the franchise future up so that they could make sure that 3 years from now, when they make a movie, that it doesn't drop down to $700 million worldwide and then continue a slide. So I think that J.J. Abrams did the best that he could with what his job was, which was to make a safe film. Before I get to the next one, if you haven't already subscribed, go down below, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment if you disagree or agree with anything I have to say here. And then you can also, in the description, there will be a link for my historical fantasy novel, Verquai from the Shadows. If you want to help support the channel, you can kind of check that out. So the next review I've got here is by Gary Wolcott, KXL FM, Portland, Oregon. And it says, Episode 9 is packed with Star Wars mumbo-jumbo and lots of fan-satisfying CGI. Speaking on behalf of non-fans, I thank the Force. It's done, over, finished, through, finally. Dude, don't ever, ever, ever review a Star Wars movie again. Take yourself off of that. Recuse yourself. You know, and I'm not saying that you have to be a Star Wars fan to review these things, but he gives me the feeling that he doesn't like Star Wars at all. And ultimately, you know, Disney, they have to make a film that even big Star Wars fans aren't going to like, but it is also their job to make it one that they do like. I mean, we have been following the story for 42 years, and we want something that's at least somewhat familiar. And yes, we want fan service. We want that moment where we see something in there and they're like, heck yeah. I mean, those are the things that we want. And this guy's basically complaining about things that Star Wars and Lucasfilm did right in this instance. So, Gary, you're wrong. Next one. Christopher Mackle. I don't know. Sin of You. It is shocking, truly shocking, how objectively the Rise of Skywalker fails. Even the prequels, as shoddy as they were, at least offered something approaching a creative vision. You know, there was nothing mind-blowingly creative about this one. It was a lot of paint by the numbers, but I will stick by the fact that they pretty much had to do that in this instance. Going forward, Star Wars is going to have their hands untied a little bit. I think they'll be able to go with something just a little more out there that won't have characters that people have loved for 40 years. And I think that's where The Last Jedi lost a lot of people, was it went so far away from what we expected from Luke that a lot of people just couldn't accept that Luke, you know, was a real character, and that Luke somehow lost faith in himself and faith in what he believed in and became a hermit. I honestly bought it. But I also understand why fans were upset with what they did with Luke on there. And I understand why they enjoyed this movie, Rise of Skywalker, better, because Luke in one scene, and spoilers ahead, made it pretty obvious in his opinion that the version of him that was in The Last Jedi was kind of a dumbass. And that's not unreal when it comes to people. We sometimes have a version of ourselves that's different, you know, a year earlier than what we are right now, or you know, a few years earlier. And sometimes we can look at that person and call him out as a dumbass, and even tell other people, hey, that me that you saw last time, yeah, that guy wasn't very smart and did some really stupid stuff. The last one I've got on here, Matthew Lacona, San Diego reader. When we meet up with brash pilot Poe, he's light speed skipping his way out of trouble, and Abrams is in much the same mode, whisking you from one thing to the next before you have much time to think or feel anything in response. It was a fast movie, and it's obvious from the very beginning that J.J. Abrams had to write a story that he wanted to tell, but he had to try to put it in a bite-sized morsel in 2.5 hours, and he probably realized early on that it was going to be really tough to do and that he was going to have to skip ahead and make things really, really fast to get to the story that he wanted. Had he done episodes 7, 8, and 9, he wouldn't have had to do that because he could have set up a lot of the things he wanted to do in Rise of Skywalker in the 8th film. And I think that's where, that's the entire reason why this thing went so fast. And I have a problem with it, but I don't. I wish that they would have just made it another half hour longer. That way they could have taken some of the exposition, which there was a lot of it, but they could have turned that into a show instead of a tell. But honestly, when it comes to dumping information on the audience, it takes longer to show than it does to tell. And if they would have shown all those things, it would have been at least 3-hour movie. And for some reason, I mean, come on, Disney decided that Endgame could be 3 hours, but, you know, we had to keep Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, the end of a 9-film saga, a franchise that just a few years ago was probably the undisputed king of film franchises. It wasn't okay to extend the same runtime for that film, the end of that saga. So I do kind of agree with him in the sense that the film does move way too fast, but I felt like that was more the decision to not make the film a little bit longer, as opposed to it being, you know, a really bad job in writing and in directing. And, you know, the last thing I'm going to say on this, and I'm looking forward to the future of Star Wars because I think a majority of the future of Star Wars is going to be in streaming. I just think epic storytelling in the science fiction and fantasy genre is just not going to lend itself to movies anymore. We want to know more about the characters. We want the fourth and fifth character in a story to actually be less two-dimensional. We want to know them. We want to understand what motivates them and why they do certain things. And honestly, that's not something you could do in a 2 to 2.5 hour film. And as Game of Thrones showed, you could just do so much when you have, close to 100 hours of time to get to know these characters. And with The Mandalorian, you know, we're getting to know the characters a little bit more than what you would in the movies. And I think we're going to see that more and more as we go forward. Honestly, in 3 years, we're going to get another Star Wars movie. And I just think that we're only going to get those movies every 3 years, but we're going to get a lot of content on Disney Plus. And I'm really excited about that. If Rise of Skywalker somehow, you know, or this entire last trilogy would have been written and creatively controlled by somebody, the one person, first of all, just within this 7.5 hours that you had to tell this story, if it was written by one person or at least had somebody that was in charge of the creative direction the entire time, the sequel trilogy would have turned out better. Even more than that, if you took the story of Rey, Poe, and Finn, and some of the other side characters, and instead turn that into 3 seasons of maybe 30 hours of content, oh my gosh, it would have absolutely been amazing. And I think in the future, when you get to know new characters in the Star Wars universe, you're going to have a lot more time with them, and we should all be pretty excited about that. All right, well, that's all I have for today. I guess my main thing is that these critics, man, come on. This film was not horrible. It doesn't deserve a 55% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And at this point, I'm just getting to the point where I just don't have any confidence in what I read on Rotten Tomatoes anymore from the critics. And it used to be that I could at least I didn't always agree with them, but at least I could have some confidence in what they're, overall saying, and now that confidence is shot. All right, I will see you guys later. Thank you to everyone who has watched our videos. We are really enjoying making these. If you'd like to support our continued efforts, please subscribe and follow. You can also check out my novel, For a Cry from the Shadows. There's a link in the description below. Have a great day, and may the Force be with you.